Good morning. For today's day of Zen, I would like to address the question that is basic to our practice. The question is, what is awakening? Our practice is precisely all about awakening. So what is this awakening that we talk about in the context of our Zen practice? Since early on, when we started our community, the Maria Kannon Zen community, and I had been asked, how would you give a working definition of Zen practice for all of those who would seek to engage in this practice? And the working definition that we have been taking is Zen is awakening to the dynamic reality of each present moment. Zen is awakening to the dynamic reality of each present moment. Now that's a very rich way of putting it. So today I would like to just shorten it to the first word. Zen is awakening. And all of the other words you may take, but even without those words, I'd like to just address that first word. What is that awakening that we're talking about? Well, it's helpful to understand something by looking at what it is not, by looking at what it opposes, or rather what we're not talking about. And of course, the other side of awakening is that we are asleep or not awakened. So what does that mean? The very first word that comes is, of course, that we are deluded. We are not seeing things straight. We are looking at things from a self-centered point of view that makes us think that there are others out there that are separate from us, or there are objects out there that are to be either possessed or to be controlled. And so in that way of seeing things, whereby the subject consciousness, the egoic self, is always at the center, we always see everything else as separate from it. So there is always a gap of separation between what I consider to be myself, which I confine to this little egoic identity that I have in my head about who I am, and the rest of the world and other beings. So there's that gap, there's that separation. And precisely because of that, we always feel that inner lack, that inner alienation from other things that are not myself. And precisely because of that lack or that separation, we feel some kind of insecurity within us, that we don't have the foundations to find ourselves grounded in peace, grounded in a sense of stability, and grounded in a sense of well-being because of that gap. My friend and Dharma brother David Loy calls that lack, and he has written several books and very insightful essays on that inner lack that human beings are driven by, that makes them want to possess more or have more power and so on, or try to be in control. And that inner lack is precisely at the roots of the kinds of mess that we ourselves are doing to the world. First of all, to ourselves and then to others. And if we magnify that lack, not just in individual terms, but in social or national terms, that lack makes entities or groups or nations feel that they need to fill it in by having more power over others or even invading others. For example, we're now seeing this situation where Russia is in the middle of invading its neighboring country, Ukraine, because of a certain sense that we lack and so on. We feel that this belongs to us, and so we lack that. And so there's that invasion. Anyway, this is just one way of looking at what's happening, as also at the roots of violence among human beings. There is that inner lack that people feel they need to fill in with that sense of control. And that inner lack thereby drives us human individuals, human beings, to behave in a way that is driven by or motivated by what we call the three poisons. The three poisons of greed, ill will, and delusion or ignorance. Greed is precisely based on that sense of lack that drives us to want more and have more, and drives us to seek more possessions and more power so that we can feel a little more secure about ourselves. But it's never ending. We can never have enough. You ask the richest persons in the world what their inner situation is, and I'm sure that you will hear that they are always seeking to have more. And so it is always that greed that motivates us, and therefore we're always incomplete, imbalanced, insecure. That is the situation of someone who is not awakened, where the little insecure self becomes the center of your universe, and you try to do everything to give some foundation to that insecure self, and therefore you act motivated by greed. And you see that there are others who are considered as rivals who also want the same things that you do. So therefore you harbor ill will against them, or you put them off at arm's length, and there is that gap, there is that tension, there is that conflict. And this is precisely what's happening in our world today. There is so much ill will between human beings, between individuals, and between groups, nation states, and so on. And that ill will causes precisely the animosity that leads to violence and destruction. In that regard, the ill will also extends not just to other sentient beings, but precisely to the whole earth, in that we see the earth as something that we are seeking to control, and in seeking to control it, to make a long story short, we are destroying it. And our ecological crisis precisely comes out of that human desire to control nature in a way that will help our human needs. And the result is that we exploit it, and we are now creating we have created a crisis that can be a threat to our very survival together on this earth. And with that, then, with greed and ill will as prime motivators of our actions, thoughts, and words, we see that the third poison is in operation. That third poison is the delusion that makes us think that precisely we are separate beings, and that delusion that makes us not aware of who we are in relation to everyone else. And so in that delusion that makes us act and behave as self-contained beings separate from others, we wreak havoc on our own lives and the lives of others. That is a description of what it is to be not awakened, to be living and to be existing in a way that you feel trapped in this little egoic self, and everyone else out there is either someone who is against you, or something, or someone that is separate from you. Now, it is that sense of lack also, that sense of insecurity that instead of making us want to possess more or want to set others against ourselves with ill will based on delusion, it can also inspire us to therefore seek a way that is not insecure, to seek a way of peace, to seek a sense of grounding in our lives. And that is where the spiritual impulse comes in. Where can I find peace? How can I fill in this slack in a way that can truly be lasting and can truly be effective for life? And this is where we are drawn to spiritual practice. And this spiritual practice that we have now taken is an invitation to simply be still, take a posture conducive to stillness, breathe in and breathe out with awareness, and allow the mind to rest in the present moment. These are the 3 points, the 3 basic points of what Zen practice is all about. Taking a posture conducive to stillness, breathing with attention, and allowing the mind to be at rest in the here and now. These are a very, very effective antidote to the greed, ill will, and ignorance that plagues us, that makes us behave and think and say things in ways that harm others and ourselves. So it's an invitation to sit back, be still, and just be. Now let us look at that a little more closely. Some of you in your earlier statement of your aspiration for today noted that for today you seek to just be, and that really hits it right on. Our practice is an invitation to just be right here, right now. So what does that entail in terms of our basic outlook and our basic attitude? It is a way of not doing. We think in terms of the way we express it that, okay, I'm going to do Zen today. But that's precisely a misnomer, a way of not expressing it correctly. Our practice is not something that we are supposed to do, but it is precisely an invitation to undo, not to do anything, but just sit and be still. The slogan is, don't just do something, sit there, as you all have heard. And so consider practice as not a doing, but precisely as an undoing, a way of divesting ourselves of all our activities and of all our thinking and of all our planning and analyzing, and just allowing us to be still and be. So that's the first point. A second point is that it is also not an activity of seeking to know. Some people might think that, okay, I'm sitting here because I want to know myself. I want to know the mysteries of the universe. I want to know some things about who I am so that I can use that knowledge for my own well-being. So we think. But that way of taking that word to know is a way that seeks to know an object, and in seeking to know something, that already presupposes that we are separate from that object and that we are not yet in possession of that which we do not know, and therefore this activity of seeking to know then becomes something that militates against itself, that increases that gap. And so what we are invited to take as an attitude in sitting here is not so much seeking to know, but to simply sit here and behold the wonder of what it is to be. I see scenarios around me my windows are open and I see trees and leaves and I see the sky. It's not so much knowing about those trees or knowing about the sky or knowing about everything that is, but it is simply beholding in wonder that they are, that each and everything is. And so it is not so much knowing, because as the ancient Greeks put it, knowledge is power, but it is not, and that kind of search for knowledge is precisely what derails us from that sense of well-being, because we are always driven by that desire to know, and that's a basic human impulse. And so with that, we are always seeking something beyond which we can ever grasp, and so we are never satisfied. So basically, Zen practice invites us to sit back and behold in wonder just everything just as it is. That sense of not knowing is a way of appreciating the gift and the beauty of things just as they are. And then a third point is that this invitation to our practice is a way of not having. So some may think that, okay, I'm going to sit because I want to attain my Buddha nature, or I want to get Kensho. You may have heard of that word. That's the Japanese word for awakening to true self. And so there are some Zen books that you can read talking about how to get to this Kensho, this experience of enlightenment. So some might come with that sense of wanting to have that sense of enlightenment. So if you have it, then you'll feel good about yourself and so on. But that is, again, a misleading way of taking what this practice is about. It's not about getting something, but it's precisely about divesting ourselves of that activity of wanting to have. And what happens when we do so? Not doing, not knowing, not having, but simply being. And as we sit here and experience that taste of just being, we experience that place where there's nothing lacking. How so? In doing, there's always something more to do. In having, there's always something that we don't have yet. And so it's a never-ending activity of wanting to have more possessions and so on. And in knowing, there's always that horizon of what we don't know yet. But if we take those precisely as the basic attitude of not doing, not having, and not knowing, then there's nothing lacking. It's simply to be right here, right now. And if we really go to the depths of that, to be right here, right now, is to experience a sense of completeness. As I realize this fact of to be, and if we put that in normal English grammar, to realize I am, when we look at things around us, we see that this chair also bees, and the trees be, the sky bees, and all of the other beings be as they are. And in experiencing everything and everyone as be, we experience that solidarity with all being. And I'm saying being not as a noun, but as a dynamic verb, to participate in this dynamic reality of being. And in participating in that dynamic reality of being, simply just to be, there is nothing that is lacking. There is that sense of completion, and there is that sense of satisfaction. There is that sense of contentment in just to be. So that's an invitation I'd like to invite to everyone to simply allow yourself to taste, not having anything, not knowing anything, not doing anything, but just being. And allow that sense of being to really expand your horizons and expand your heart to embrace all that bees. And we know that we are all one in that being. And so if that really is a place that we can come to as our home base, just being, we realize a sense of kinship with all that bees. Everyone who bees with me is my kin and is someone and something that I can relate to from an intimate place. So someone who has arrived at this place of being as a place of one's home comes and talks to others, and one feels precisely that sense of affinity with each and everyone that one is relating to, because one has that sense of deep interconnectedness and kinship from the same side, not as somebody other to me, but precisely as someone with whom I am in intimate connectedness and for whom I care and for whom I can also offer my life. And that is a strange thing about it. That kinship brings about, of course, solidarity. And so if we, for example, hear about Ukraine, we think, oh, that's a country that we don't have anything to do with, whatever you might think about it. But precisely from the standpoint of being, the being of the people of Ukraine, the being of the people of Syria, the being of those people who are being persecuted is my own being, and the pain that they experience becomes my very own pain. And so I am moved thereby to respond and live my life in a way that may help in alleviating that pain. So in short, to be awakened is not to do anything, not to have anything, not to know anything in particular, but precisely in undoing and in unknowing and in unhaving, we experience that taste of being. Buddhist terminology would have it as a way of emptying. That's why the term emptiness, shunyata, becomes prominent in Buddhist vocabulary. It's emptying out what we think we are doing, what we think we are having, and what we think we are knowing, and allowing that sense of freedom just to be, to take hold and to be the prominent attitude that we have. And in just being, we experience kinship with each and everyone and each and everything. We experience that solidarity in the pain of the world and also solidarity in the joys and hopes of all. And we thereby are able to cultivate a sense of responsiveness to what is happening in the world and what is happening around us, so that I may be able to give my life as a gift back to the world, that it may be of help somehow in alleviating the pain and suffering of those with whom I am kin. So to be awakened then is not to be anything special, but just to be. And that to be entails that sense of kinship, that sense of solidarity, that sense of responsiveness, which I would like to also rephrase as responsibility, the ability to respond to what is happening in a way that comes from the heart and not from duty or from some blueprint or from some principle that I have in my head, but just as a very spontaneous and natural response to what is. For example, there is a koan in the Blue Cliff Records that says, what does the Bodhisattva of compassion have to do with all of those eyes and arms, eyes and hands? It is known that in the iconography of the Bodhisattva of compassion has 1,000 eyes to see around to see everything that is all around the universe in all nooks and crannies. And the Bodhisattva of compassion also has 1,000 arms to reach out and offer things that are needed wherever they are needed. So that's an iconography of one who is responsive, seeing what is going on and hearing the pain of the world, hearing the cries of the world as one's own cries, and offering arms of succor, or offering food, or offering drink, or offering solace, or offering reprimand wherever it is needed, and so on, in a way that responds to situations as they are called for. And in that koan, it says, what are all of these hands and eyes of the Bodhisattva of compassion about? And the answer there is, it's like the hand moving in the middle of the night to straighten a pillow when it is out of position, without even being conscious of it. We are asleep, and so when the pillow that that our head is reclining on becomes misplaced, then unconsciously the hand just moves and puts it back in the right place. So without being self-conscious of my doing anything for others, it's simply a spontaneous way of offering myself in the way that is most natural. To be awakened is to be kin, to be in solidarity, and to be responsive and responsible. These words are not usually seen in the Buddhist textbooks, but I'd like to offer them for guidelines in our day-to-day way of living our lives, that we see each and everyone as kin, because we share in this exquisite taste of being together. And in really seeing that and experiencing that and tasting that, our heart expands to all that bees, knowing that who I am cannot be separated from each and everyone, and each from anyone that is, from anyone that bees. And I am able to sense that solidarity with them in a way that I am moved to give my life to help in alleviating the pain of the world. That is the invitation. So that is why in the Buddhist terminology, one who is awakened is characterized by a life of wisdom, one who sees things as they are, that oozes out in compassion, a way of suffering with all of those who are suffering in a way that gives oneself towards the alleviation of that suffering. And in doing so, and in being so, one finds true peace and true joy. And out of that oozes a sense of gratitude for just being. So let us continue to allow ourselves to receive the gift of this practice by giving ourselves that time on a day-to-day basis to just be sitting in a posture of that is conducive to stillness, breathing in and breathing out with attention, and allowing the mind to stay in the here and now. And as this becomes habitual, then the habit of awakening will gradually seep into our lives, and we will see how we might be able to offer ourselves as an agent of healing our wounded world in our own little ways, without being too self-conscious or without being too presumptuous about it. Just in our own simple ways, just being who we are. And it's a source of great joy to be able to sit together with a community, a family of individuals who are also on this path of awakening. So thank you for being here today.